Colonies of Venus, a game by Daryl, Chow, and Rocchi. You are in charge of a newly founded outpost on the frontiers of Venus, where resources are scarce and rewards are few. You struggle to farm and mine what you need to survive. There are reports of monsters lurking in the wilderness, swooping in to raid resources and carry off unlucky colonists. The player who is able to maintain and develop the most prosperous colony after 5 years will be crowned the first Lord of Venus. Colonies of Venus takes place in rounds, which are years in the game. The game is played out over 5 years. Each year, new supplies, expeditions, and buildings are added to the game board, and players roll dice and assign them to the board, competing for resources, buildings, colonists, and glory from dangerous expeditions. At the end of 5 years, the player with the most prosperous colony is the winner. 3 points are awarded for special buildings, number of buildings, resources, food and moonstone, and the majority in each type of colonist. There are 3 phases to each round. Players roll and assign dice to the board, resolve actions on the main board, and end of turn upkeep and board refresh. Players roll and assign dice. Each round, players will roll their 5 dice and take turns assigning them to the various areas on the main game board. The various areas include undertaking expeditions, harvesting food, mining moonstone, building buildings, and recruiting colonists. After all dice have been placed, each of the areas resolve in order in a slightly different fashion. For expeditions, dice placed after the first must be equal or higher to the previous value. When resolved, the 2 players who place the highest totals get to choose their reward. Farms and mines are both resolved the same way. Each round, a number of dice are rolled to determine the amount of resources available that turn. Dice assigned to these areas by players are placed lowest dice first in the order and higher dice last in order. A 3 placed to an area would be slid between the 2 and the 4. When resolved, the lowest values take their resources equal to their die value first, and the higher values take last, if any remain. When players place dice on buildings, they must meet a minimum value with their die and pay that much moonstone to build it. At the end of the round, players pay the cost in moonstone and take their desired building. Players may also be outbid on a building with a higher valued die. When recruiting colonists from the spaceport, players with lower valued dice select first, paying for them with food. They then take the colonists, place them on their buildings, which will give them resources or special abilities. Finally, players may also place dice on the relief ship, which provide tools to adjust die values. When low-valued dice are placed on the board, the Raider's attack track is advanced, which will periodically trigger attacks on other players. End of turn upkeep. At the end of the turn, players feed and redeploy colonists and activate buildings. Then players collect their dice from the board, replenish expeditions, buildings, colonists, and resources, and play begins again for the next round. Although for this demonstration I have shown dice played in sequence to each area, during the game dice can be played to any area in any order. This creates a lot of competitive interaction. Colonies of Venus is an exciting dice worker placement game where the allocation of dice to each section is unique and highly dynamic between players. Players are running a settlement on the surface of Venus, gathering food, mining moonstone, building buildings, undertaking expeditions, and surviving attacks by alien raiders. It can be hard to eke out your existence on the hard scrabble surface of Venus, but players compete to build a satisfying engine to survive and flourish. The game provides a very real and exciting sense of narrative.